You are born, or rather, you hatch from your egg, deep in the vastness of the ocean. You look around, as if expecting someone to be there, maybe a parent, watching over you, ready to protect you. But there's nothing. No one. Your mother, like your father, is long gone. That's how it works down here. No family, no guidance, just you, alone in the dark. You don't cry out. You are not even sad. It's just how it is, and actually, it's not that bad down here. It's peaceful, and you feel a quiet excitement about what this world might hold. Your world is pitch black. No sunlight has reached these depths for millions of years. The water around you is near freezing, hovering just above the point where it would turn to ice. And the pressure, well, the pressure is crushing down on you with a force that's nearly 120 times stronger than what humans experience at sea level. This isn't just deep water, this is the abyss. You don't have a swim bladder like other fish. You can't control your buoyancy by inflating or deflating an internal organ. Instead, your entire body is essentially a gelatinous mass that's perfectly adapted to this crushing environment. Your flesh is less dense than water, which means you're naturally buoyant without needing any fancy internal mechanisms. While other fish would be crushed flat or have their organs rupture from the pressure, you're designed to handle it. But here's what makes your existence truly bizarre. You don't really swim. Swimming requires energy, and energy is the one thing you can't afford to waste down here. Food is scarce, scattered, and unpredictable. So instead of actively hunting or chasing prey, you do something that would seem lazy to surface dwellers, but is actually genius at these depths. You hover. You position yourself just above the seafloor, mouth open, waiting. Your body barely moves except for the occasional subtle adjustment to maintain your position. You're like a living trap, perfectly camouflaged and motionless. Small crustaceans, marine worms, and other tiny creatures drift by, completely unaware that you're there. When something edible floats close enough to your mouth, you don't chase it, you simply engulf it. This isn't active predation, this is opportunistic survival. Sometimes you might go days, even weeks, without a substantial meal. Your metabolism has slowed to a crawl to match the scarcity of your environment. While surface fish are constantly moving, constantly burning energy, you've mastered the art of doing absolutely nothing until it's absolutely necessary. The sea floor around you is littered with the remains of creatures that didn't make it. Whale bones, the shells of long-dead crustaceans, bits of organic matter that have drifted down from the surface world far above. This is marine snow, and it's your grocery store. Tiny particles of decomposing material slowly drift down like a gentle, never-ending snowfall. Sometimes you'll position yourself to catch these particles as they fall. It's not exactly a feast, but it's sustenance. Your eyes are small and relatively useless in this environment. There's no light to see by anyway, so evolution has basically given up on making your vision a priority. Instead, you rely on other senses. You can detect vibrations in the water, changes in pressure, chemical signatures that tell you when something edible is nearby. Your lateral line system, a network of sensory organs that runs along your body, picks up the slightest movements in the water around you. Temperature regulation isn't something you worry about. Your body temperature matches the water around you, which stays consistently cold year-round. You don't shiver, you don't generate body heat, and you don't need to. You're essentially a cold-blooded creature, living in a natural refrigerator. Reproduction at these depths is a challenge that most surface creatures couldn't even comprehend. Finding a mate when you're floating in the middle of a vast, dark ocean is like trying to find a specific grain of sand in a desert while blindfolded. You don't actively search for partners. Instead, you rely on chemical signals, pheromones that can travel through the water over considerable distances. Not that you have to worry about it right now. You are young, but time will come. When you do encounter another blobfish in the future, the interaction will be brief and practical. There's no courtship ritual, no elaborate displays, no competition for the best territory. You simply release your gametes into the water column and hope for the best. The fertilized eggs will drift in the current, and the larvae that survive will eventually settle on the seafloor to begin their own stationary existence. Your lifespan is surprisingly long for such a seemingly fragile creature. You can live for over a century, drifting in the same general area, barely moving, barely changing. While surface fish deal with predators, temperature fluctuations, and constant environmental changes, your world is remarkably stable. The same crushing pressure, the same frigid temperature, the same endless darkness, day after day, year after year, decade after decade. But stability comes with a cost. You're incredibly vulnerable to changes in your environment. When deep-sea trawling nets drag across the seafloor, you have no escape mechanism. You can't swim away quickly, you can't hide, and you can't defend yourself. You're simply scooped up along with everything else in the net's path. Luckily, this didn't already happen to you, but there's where your reputation as the world's ugliest animal comes from. When you're brought to the surface, the rapid change in pressure causes your body to expand and deform. Your gelatinous flesh, which is perfectly adapted to high-pressure environments, essentially falls apart when that pressure is removed. You don't actually look like a blob of jelly in your natural habitat. At depth, you look like a relatively normal fish, maybe a bit more gelatinous than most, but definitely recognizable as a fish. The images that made you famous, the ones that turned you into a meme, those were taken after your body had been destroyed by decompression. It's like judging how humans look based on what happens to them in a vacuum chamber. The comparison isn't fair, but it's the only way surface dwellers ever see you. Your digestive system is adapted to process whatever organic matter you can find. You don't have the luxury of being picky about your food. A piece of marine snow, a dead copepod, a fragment of decomposing algae that drifted down from the surface, it all goes into your stomach. Your digestive enzymes work slowly but efficiently, extracting every possible nutrient from whatever you consume. The ocean around you is layered with different water masses, each with its own temperature and chemical composition. You exist in what's called the bathypelagic zone, where the water is uniformly cold and the pressure is crushing. Above you, far above you, is the sunlit surface world where most marine life exists. Below you, the seafloor extends into trenches that are even deeper and more extreme than where you live. You're part of a community of deep-sea creatures that most humans never think about. There are deep-sea anglerfish with their glowing lures, giant tube worms clustered around hydrothermal vents, and bizarre-looking hagfish that scavenge the seafloor. You're all adapted to the same impossible conditions, all finding ways to survive in a world that seems hostile to life. The water column above you is like a highway of falling organic matter, dead plankton, fecal pellets from surface animals, fragments of larger creatures that died in the upper layers of the ocean. This constant rain of organic debris is what sustains the entire deep-sea ecosystem. You're essentially living off the scraps from the surface world, but you've become so efficient at it that you can survive and even thrive in conditions that would kill most other forms of life. Your gill system works differently from surface fish. You extract oxygen from water that contains much less dissolved oxygen than surface waters. Your blood carries oxygen more efficiently, and your organs require less oxygen to function. Every aspect of your physiology is fine-tuned for survival in an environment where resources are scarce and conditions are extreme. When storms rage on the surface, thousands of meters above you, you feel nothing. The massive waves, the driving rain, the chaos of surface weather, none of it reaches your world. You exist in a realm of perpetual calm, where the only movement is the slow drift of marine snow and the occasional passage of a deep-sea creature. And to be honest, it's not that bad down here. Your nervous system processes information slowly. Quick reflexes aren't necessary when you're living in slow motion. Your brain is small and simple, focused on the basic functions of survival. You don't form memories the way surface animals do. You don't learn complex behaviors, and you don't engage in social interactions. Your existence is reduced to the most fundamental biological processes. The chemistry of the water around you is different from surface seawater. It's more acidic, with different concentrations of dissolved minerals. Your body has adapted to these conditions over millions of years of evolution. You can process nutrients that would be toxic to surface creatures, and you can function in water that would be unlivable for most other forms of life. Your skin is permeable, allowing water to pass through it freely. This helps you maintain the same internal pressure as the water around you, which is crucial for surviving at depth. Surface fish have scales and skin that form a barrier between their internal organs and the external environment. You don't have that luxury. Your body is essentially in constant contact with the surrounding water. The sounds that reach your depth are different from surface sounds. The calls of whales, the distant rumble of ships, the crack of ice breaking in polar regions, all of these sounds travel through the water column and eventually reach your ears. But the sounds are muffled, distorted, and often delayed by the time they reach your depth. You're part of a food web that extends from the surface to the deepest ocean trenches. The energy that sustains you originally came from photosynthesis in the surface waters, but by the time it reaches you, it's been processed and reprocessed by countless other organisms. You're living off the waste products of the surface world, but you've become so efficient at it that you can extract nutrition from materials that surface creatures would consider worthless. Your position in the water column is crucial to your survival. Too high, and you'll drift into waters where the pressure is too low for your body to function properly. Too low, and you'll settle on the seafloor where you can't intercept the falling organic matter that sustains you. You've found the perfect depth where the pressure is right, the temperature is stable, and the food supply is adequate. The seasonal changes that drive the surface ocean have subtle effects on your world. During spring blooms, when surface productivity increases, more organic matter eventually drifts down to your depth. During winter, when surface productivity decreases, the food supply becomes even more scarce. You've adapted to these cycles, slowing your metabolism even further during lean periods. Your reproductive cycle is tied to these seasonal changes in food availability. You time your spawning to coincide with periods when food is most abundant, giving your offspring the best chance of survival. But even under the best conditions, most of your offspring won't survive to adulthood. The deep sea is unforgiving, and only the most perfectly adapted individuals make it through their first year of life. Your body is essentially a living fossil, relatively unchanged for millions of years. While surface fish have evolved elaborate fins, complex behaviors, and sophisticated sensory systems, you've remained simple and efficient. Your body plan works perfectly for your environment, so there's been no evolutionary pressure to change it. The water around you moves in slow, predictable currents. These deep-sea currents are driven by differences in water density and temperature, and they flow much more slowly than surface currents. You drift with these currents, covering vast distances over the course of your long lifetime, but always staying within the same depth range where you can survive. Human activities on the surface have consequences that eventually reach your world. Pollution, climate change, and overfishing all have effects that trickle down to the deep sea. But these changes happen slowly, over decades or centuries, and your long lifespan allows you to adapt to gradual environmental changes that would devastate shorter-lived species. Your existence is a testament to life's ability to adapt to the most extreme conditions. You've found a way to survive in a world of crushing pressure, freezing temperatures, and perpetual darkness. You've turned scarcity into an advantage, using your low-energy lifestyle to outlast more active competitors. You've mastered the art of doing nothing, and in doing so, you've created a sustainable way of life that has persisted for millions of years. This is your reality as a blobfish, not the grotesque, deformed creature that became an internet meme, but a perfectly adapted deep-sea survivor living in one of the most extreme environments on Earth, thriving in conditions that would destroy most other forms of life. Your existence is a reminder that life finds a way, even in the most impossible places. Your survival in the deep-sea trenches depends on mastering a world that operates by completely different rules than the surface world you occasionally get dragged up to. The pressure down here isn't just intense, it's your lifeline. Every cell in your gelatinous body has adapted to function under crushing weight that would obliterate most creatures. When you're yanked up to the surface by fishing nets, that's when you transform into the sagging, deflated mass that made you internet famous. But down here, at depth, you're perfectly structured for this alien environment. Your daily routine revolves around energy conservation. Active hunting is a luxury you can't afford in a world where every calorie counts. Instead, you've perfected the art of strategic positioning. You hover near the seafloor, your body acting like a living net, catching whatever organic matter drifts down from the layers above. Marine snow, decaying plankton, fragments of dead fish, the occasional piece of a whale carcass that has sunk from the surface. Everything is fair game, and nothing goes to waste. The falling food supply from above is unpredictable. Some days bring a bounty of organic debris, other days deliver almost nothing. You've learned to capitalize on the good times. When a large carcass settles nearby, it becomes the center of a feeding frenzy. You're not alone down here. Other deep-sea creatures converge on these rare windfalls, creating temporary communities around the feast. But you don't compete aggressively like surface predators. Competition down here is more subtle, more patient. Your movements are deliberate and slow. Quick, jerky motions waste precious energy and serve no purpose in an environment where everything moves at a glacial pace. You drift with the current, adjusting your position with minimal fin movements. Your body naturally maintains neutral buoyancy, so you expend almost no energy just staying suspended in the water column. This is efficiency refined over millions of years of evolution. The water around you is near freezing, hovering just above the point where it would turn solid. Your body temperature matches the water exactly. There's no internal heating system, no warm blood pumping through your veins. You are, quite literally, a cold-blooded creature in the most extreme sense. This might sound miserable, but it's actually another adaptation that works in your favor. Cold temperatures slow down your metabolism dramatically, meaning you need far less food to survive than warm-blooded creatures of comparable size. Your reproductive strategy reflects the harsh realities of deep-sea life. There are no elaborate mating rituals, no territorial disputes over prime breeding grounds. When the time comes, you simply release your gametes into the water column and trust that some will find their way to a mate. It's a numbers game played across vast distances. The fertilized eggs drift in the current, developing slowly in the cold water. Many won't survive, but enough do to continue the species. The darkness is absolute. No trace of sunlight penetrates to your depth. Your eyes, though small, are still functional, but they're adapted to detect the faint bioluminescence produced by other deep-sea creatures. Flashes of light in the darkness often signal food or danger. A dying creature might emit light as it sinks, attracting scavengers like yourself. Predators use light to communicate or to lure prey. You've learned to read these signals, to distinguish between opportunity and threat. Your lateral line system is far more important than your eyes. This network of sensory organs detects minute changes in water pressure and movement. A small fish swimming nearby creates pressure waves that you can sense from a considerable distance. The settling of a piece of marine snow creates its own subtle signature. Even the movements of other blobfish register on your sensory system. You exist in a world of vibrations and pressure changes, reading the water like others read text. The chemical composition of the water tells you stories. Dissolved compounds from decomposing organic matter create scent trails that lead to food sources. The chemical signature of other blobfish helps you identify potential mates during breeding season. Predators leave their own chemical traces, warning you to adjust your position or seek shelter. Your entire world is written in molecules dissolved in seawater. Territory isn't something you defend with aggression. Instead, you establish loose home ranges based on food availability and favorable currents. These areas might overlap with other blobfish without conflict. There's usually enough space and resources for everyone, and the energy cost of defending territory would outweigh any benefits. You might spend weeks or months in the same general area if conditions are good, then drift to new territory when resources become scarce. The geological features of the deep ocean floor provide structure to your world. Underwater mountains, trenches, and ridges create different current patterns and microclimates. Some areas collect more falling debris than others. Rocky outcrops and provide shelter from stronger currents. You've learned to navigate this underwater landscape, seeking out the spots where conditions align in your favor. Your body is remarkably resilient, despite its soft, gelatinous appearance. You can survive minor injuries that would be fatal to creatures with more rigid body structures. Your lack of a swim bladder means you can't suffer from decompression injuries when pressure changes occur. Your flexible body can squeeze through spaces that would trap other fish. This adaptability serves you well in an environment where hazards can appear without warning. The seasonal cycles of the surface world still affect you, though in muted ways. Spring and summer, blooms of phytoplankton eventually rain down to your depth as marine snow. These seasonal pulses of food can trigger feeding frenzies and influence your reproductive cycles. Even thousands of feet below the surface, you remain connected to the rhythms of the world above. Your lifespan stretches across decades, possibly over a century. This longevity is both a blessing and a curse. You have time to learn the intricate patterns of your environment, to memorize the locations of reliable food sources, to understand the subtle changes that signal good or bad conditions ahead. But you also live through long periods of scarcity, through changes in ocean chemistry, through the gradual shifts that come with climate change. The deep ocean is not static. Currents shift, temperatures fluctuate, and the chemistry of the water changes over time. You've witnessed these changes over your long life, adapting your behavior as conditions evolve. Some changes happen quickly, like the sudden appearance of a new food source. Others unfold over years or decades, requiring gradual adjustments to your lifestyle. human activity increasingly intrudes into your world. Deep-sea fishing nets occasionally sweep through your habitat, sometimes catching you in their path. The nets that drag you to the surface aren't targeting you specifically. You're bycatch, an unintended consequence of fishing for more commercially valuable species. But the impact on your population is real and growing. The pressure changes as you're hauled upward are catastrophic. Your body, perfectly adapted for crushing deep-sea pressure, begins to expand and distort as the pressure decreases. By the time you reach the surface, you've transformed into something unrecognizable. Your tissues have expanded, your body has lost its shape, and you're barely alive. This is the version of you that humans see and photograph, the bloated, sad-looking creature that became an internet meme. Human pollution reaches even your remote habitat. Microplastics drift down from the surface, mixed in with the organic debris you depend on for food. Chemical pollutants concentrate in the deep ocean, accumulating in the tissues of creatures like you. These contaminants work their way up the food chain, affecting everything from the smallest bacteria to the largest predators. Climate change alters the fundamental chemistry of your world. As the ocean absorbs more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, the water becomes more acidic. This affects the entire food web, from the microscopic creatures that form the base of the system to the large predators at the top. Temperature changes, even small ones, can shift current patterns and affect the distribution of food sources. Your species has survived for millions of years in one of Earth's most challenging environments. You've weathered ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and mass extinctions. Your adaptations are the result of countless generations of natural selection, each one fine-tuning your ability to survive in the deep ocean. You represent one of evolution's most successful experiments in extreme living. The deep-sea ecosystem you inhabit is one of the least understood environments on Earth. Scientists know more about the surface of Mars than they do about the deep ocean. Your world remains largely unexplored, filled with species that have never been cataloged and ecosystems that operate by rules we're only beginning to understand. You are part of this hidden world, a survivor in Earth's final frontier. Your current existence as a blobfish is about to become even more challenging. The deep-sea environment you've mastered is changing, and not in ways that favor your ancient survival strategies. The water around you carries new chemical signatures, substances that didn't exist when your species first evolved. These are the calling cards of surface dwellers, compounds that drift down from a world you'll never see, but that increasingly shapes your reality. Microplastics are everywhere now. These microscopic fragments float through your habitat like toxic snow, mixing with the marine snow you depend on for survival. Your feeding strategy, so perfectly adapted for millions of years, becomes a liability. You can't distinguish between nutritious organic matter and these synthetic particles. When you filter feed, you're consuming both sustenance and poison in equal measure. The plastic accumulates in your tissues, disrupting your already delicate internal chemistry. Your reproductive cycle faces new obstacles. The chemicals leaching from these particles interfere with your hormonal signals, the same chemical cues that have guided mating for countless generations. Finding a mate was already a challenge in the vast darkness, but now, even when you locate another blobfish, the chemical communication system that should trigger reproduction doesn't function properly. Fewer eggs are laid, and those that do develop often carry genetic damage from the contaminated environment. The pharmaceutical residues that rain down from the surface world create another layer of complications. Antidepressants, antibiotics, and hormones from human waste treatment systems alter your behavior and physiology in ways your species has never encountered. Your already slow metabolism becomes even more sluggish. The antibiotics kill beneficial bacteria in your gut, bacteria that help you digest the limited food available in your environment. You're literally being poisoned by substances designed to heal creatures you'll never meet. Heavy metals accumulate in your tissues at concentrations that would be lethal to most life forms. Your body's ability to handle these toxins is limited, and over your potentially century-long lifespan, they build up to dangerous levels. Mercury, lead, and cadmium interfere with your nervous system, making your already limited sensory capabilities even more restricted. The vibrations you rely on to detect food and threats become harder to interpret through the fog of neurological damage. Climate change affects your world in ways that surface dwellers rarely consider. The ocean is becoming more acidic as it absorbs excess carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. This acidification doesn't just affect creatures with shells or skeletons, it alters the entire chemistry of your environment. The pH changes affect how proteins fold in your body, potentially disrupting every biological process from digestion to reproduction. Your gelatinous body, so perfectly adapted to the current chemical conditions, struggles to maintain its structure in this new acidic environment. The temperature of your deep-sea habitat is rising, slowly but steadily. Even a degree or two of warming disrupts the delicate balance you've evolved to exploit. The thermal layers that help distribute nutrients through your environment shift, altering the patterns of food delivery you've relied on for millions of years. The warmer water holds less oxygen, making your already challenging existence even more precarious. Deep-sea mining operations represent perhaps the most direct threat to your survival. These massive machines scrape the seafloor where you live, destroying habitat that took millennia to develop. The sediment they kick up creates clouds of particles that can last for weeks, blocking what little light filters down from above and disrupting the feeding patterns of the creatures you depend on. The noise from these operations travels for hundreds of kilometers through the water, interfering with your ability to sense your environment. Your food web is collapsing from the bottom up. The marine snow you depend on contains fewer nutrients as surface waters become more polluted and less productive. The organic matter that drifts down to you is increasingly contaminated with toxins, making each meal a gamble between nourishment and poisoning. The deep-sea creatures that die and provide occasional windfalls of nutrition are themselves carrying higher concentrations of pollutants, passing the contamination up the food chain to you. The shipping lanes far above your head create a constant background of noise that interferes with your sensory world. The low-frequency rumble of massive container ships travels through the water column, masking the subtle vibrations you use to navigate and find food. This acoustic pollution turns your environment into a sensory wasteland, making it even harder to locate the scarce resources you need to survive. Military sonar and seismic surveys for oil exploration send powerful sound waves through your habitat. These intense acoustic pulses can cause physical damage to your soft tissues and disrupt your behavior for days or weeks. The sound waves are so powerful they can kill smaller organisms outright, further reducing the already limited food available in your environment. Ocean currents that have flowed in predictable patterns for millions of years are shifting as global temperatures rise. These currents carry the marine snow and nutrients you depend on, and their disruption means food becomes even more unpredictable. Areas that were once reliable feeding grounds become barren, while other regions experience sudden influxes of nutrients that create toxic blooms harmful to your health. The pressure changes caused by deep-sea oil drilling and extraction create seismic disturbances that ripple through your habitat. Your body, so perfectly calibrated to the stable pressure of the deep ocean, struggles to adapt to these artificial fluctuations. The stress disrupts your already slow metabolism and can cause tissue damage that never fully heals. Invasive species, transported to new environments by human activities, are reaching even the deepest parts of the ocean. These newcomers compete for the same scarce resources you depend on, but they often have advantages your species lacks. They may be more efficient at capturing food or more resistant to the pollutants now common in your environment. Your millions of years of perfect adaptation to this specific niche become a disadvantage when the rules of survival suddenly change. The chemicals used in deep-sea research and exploration, from the preservatives in scientific equipment to the fuels and lubricants from submersibles, add another layer of contamination to your world. Every human expedition to your habitat leaves behind a chemical signature that persists in the stable deep-sea environment for years or decades. Your species' slow reproduction rate, once an advantage in a stable environment, becomes a critical weakness in this rapidly changing world. While surface species can adapt to new conditions within a few generations, your long lifespan and infrequent reproduction mean you can't evolve quickly enough to keep pace with the changes. You're locked into biological strategies that worked perfectly for millions of years, but are increasingly maladaptive in the modern ocean. The cumulative effect of all these stresses creates a cascade of problems that your species has never faced before. Your immune system, already minimal due to the low pathogen environment of the deep sea, can't cope with the new diseases and parasites that arrive with changing ocean conditions. Your ability to heal from injuries diminishes as malnutrition and toxic exposure weaken your body's repair mechanisms. Despite these mounting challenges, you persist in the only way you know how, following the same patterns that have sustained your species through ice ages and mass extinctions. But this time, the changes are happening faster than your species can adapt, and they're coming from a source your evolution never prepared you for: the increasingly destructive influence of a species that lives in a world of light and air, a world you'll never see, but that now determines whether your ancient lineage will survive the next century. Now that you understand the threats facing your existence, let me explain exactly how these dangers will transform your reality as a blobfish. The changes happening above your head are already rippling down through the water column, and each wave of human impact is about to make your life exponentially more difficult. First, let's talk about what happens when fishing nets drag across your world. You're hovering there, minding your own business, when suddenly the entire seafloor around you erupts into chaos. Massive trawling nets scrape along the bottom, tearing up everything in their path. You can't swim away fast enough because, remember, you're built for floating, not fleeing. The nets don't discriminate between target fish and you. They scoop up everything, including the coral formations you rely on for shelter and the sediment communities that create your food web. Even if you somehow avoid getting caught directly, your hunting grounds are destroyed. Those carefully balanced ecosystems that took decades to establish get obliterated in minutes. The noise alone is overwhelming. Your sensory system, perfectly tuned to detect the faintest vibrations of falling marine snow, gets completely overwhelmed by the mechanical grinding of nets and engines. It's like trying to hear a whisper during a thunderstorm. You lose your ability to hunt effectively because you can't distinguish between the subtle signals of food and the overwhelming cacophony of human machinery. But the physical destruction is just the beginning. The sediment clouds kicked up by bottom trawling create a completely different environment. Instead of the clear, still water you're adapted to, you're now suspended in a murky soup of disturbed mud and debris. Your gill system, designed for extracting oxygen from clean deep water, starts clogging with particles. Breathing becomes more difficult, and you're forced to expend precious energy just to survive in conditions your species never evolved to handle. The microplastic situation is particularly insidious because you can't see them coming. These tiny fragments are everywhere now, mixed in with the organic matter you normally consume. Your feeding strategy of passively filtering whatever drifts by means you're constantly ingesting plastic particles. Your digestive system has no mechanism to break down synthetic polymers, so they accumulate in your tissues. Over time, these microplastics interfere with your body's basic functions. They block your digestive tract, preventing proper nutrient absorption. They leach toxic chemicals directly into your bloodstream, disrupting your hormone systems and cellular processes. The chemical pollution creates an entirely different kind of nightmare. Agricultural runoff, industrial waste, and pharmaceutical residues are all making their way down to your depth. Your skin, which is essentially one giant permeable membrane, absorbs these toxins directly from the water. Pesticides interfere with your nervous system, making it even harder to detect food or danger. Heavy metals accumulate in your organs, slowly poisoning you from the inside. Endocrine disruptors mess with your reproductive systems, making it difficult or impossible to successfully mate and produce viable offspring. Ocean acidification is literally dissolving your world. The increased acidity makes it harder for any organisms with calcium carbonate shells to survive. This means that the tiny organisms that form the base of your food web start disappearing. The marine snow that drifts down becomes less nutritious and less abundant. You find yourself in a situation where you're expending the same amount of energy to hunt, but getting significantly less food in return. It's like being on a starvation diet you never chose. The temperature changes might seem subtle to surface dwellers, but down here, even a degree or two makes a massive difference. Your metabolism is perfectly calibrated to the stable temperatures of the deep ocean. When the water warms up, your body's chemical processes speed up, requiring more energy and oxygen, but warmer water holds less dissolved oxygen, creating a double problem. You need more oxygen precisely when less is available. Your heart rate increases, your breathing becomes labored, and you're forced to move to different areas to find cooler water, disrupting feeding patterns that have worked for millions of years. The deep-sea mining operations are like underwater strip mining. Massive machines scrape away the seafloor, destroying entire ecosystems in their quest for rare earth metals. The sediment plumes they create can travel for kilometers, choking marine life throughout the region. The noise from these operations is constant and overwhelming, making it impossible for you to hunt effectively. Even worse, the mining exposes heavy metals and other toxic substances that have been safely buried in the sediment for centuries, releasing them into the water column where they can poison everything they touch. Your reproductive cycle, already precarious, becomes nearly impossible under these conditions. The chemical signals you use to find mates get overwhelmed by pollution. The stress of dealing with constant environmental changes affects your hormone production, making it difficult to reproduce successfully. Even if you do manage to mate, the eggs and larvae face a gauntlet of threats that didn't exist before. The water chemistry is wrong, the food supply is unpredictable, and the physical environment is unstable. The cascading effects throughout your food web create a domino effect of problems. When the smaller organisms at the base of the food chain start dying off due to acidification and pollution, it affects everything above them. The marine snow that sustains you becomes less nutritious and less abundant. You're forced to compete more intensely for fewer resources. The delicate balance of your ecosystem, maintained for millions of years, starts breaking down. Invasive species, transported by shipping and other human activities, introduce new forms of competition and predation that you're not equipped to handle. These organisms might be more aggressive, more efficient at finding food, or carry diseases that your immune system has never encountered. They disrupt the established relationships between species, creating unpredictable changes in your environment. The cumulative effect of all these stressors is that your margin for survival, already slim in the challenging deep-sea environment, becomes virtually non-existent. Every aspect of your existence that evolution optimized over millions of years is now being challenged simultaneously. You're dealing with problems that your species has never encountered before, and you're trying to solve them with biological tools that were designed for a completely different world. The most tragic part is that these changes are happening faster than evolution can respond. Your species survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and massive geological changes because they occurred over timescales that allowed for adaptation. But the current rate of environmental change is unprecedented in Earth's history. There's simply not enough time for your species to evolve solutions to these new challenges. Your ancient survival strategy of remaining unchanged and perfectly adapted to stable conditions becomes a liability in a rapidly changing world. The very traits that made you successful for millions of years now make you vulnerable to extinction. You're watching your world transform into something completely unrecognizable, and there's nothing you can do about it except try to survive one more day in an increasingly hostile environment. The deep ocean doesn't forgive mistakes. Every movement costs energy you can't afford to waste, and every choice determines whether you survive another day or become part of the marine snow drifting endlessly through the abyss. Your existence as a blobfish is a constant calculation of risk versus reward, where the smallest miscalculation can mean the difference between life and death. When you're young, maybe only a few years old, you don't understand the delicate balance that keeps you alive. You drift closer to thermal vents than you should, drawn by the warmth and the promise of more abundant food. The water here shimmers with heat, and strange creatures move through the darkness, things you've never seen before. Tube worms sway like underwater grass, their bodies filtering chemicals from the superheated water. Crabs scuttle across the rocky surfaces, their shells clicking against the stone. You approach one of these vents, your gelatinous body absorbing the unfamiliar warmth. For a moment, it feels incredible. The heat penetrates your tissues, energizing cells that have known only the bitter cold of the deep. But then something goes wrong. The water temperature spikes suddenly, a burst of superheated fluid erupting from a crack in the seafloor. Your body, adapted for the stable cold of the deep ocean, can't handle the extreme heat. Your proteins begin to denature. Your cellular structure starts to break down. You try to move away, but your body doesn't respond the way it should. The heat has damaged your nervous system, scrambled the electrical signals that control your movement. You drift helplessly, your form beginning to lose its shape as the heat continues to cook you from the inside. This is how many young blobfish die, drawn to the warmth of thermal vents, only to discover that their bodies can't survive the extreme conditions. But let's say you're one of the lucky ones. You learn to avoid the thermal vents, to recognize the subtle changes in water temperature that signal danger. You develop an instinct for the safe zones, the areas where the water remains at the perfect temperature for your survival. You learn that in the deep ocean, consistency is everything. The slightest variation in your environment can be fatal. As you grow older, you begin to understand the true nature of your existence. You're not just surviving in the deep ocean, you're part of a vast, interconnected ecosystem that spans the entire planet. The marine snow that feeds you doesn't just appear from nowhere. It's the result of a complex chain of events that begins thousands of meters above you, at the surface of the ocean, where sunlight penetrates the water and phytoplankton bloom in massive numbers. These microscopic organisms form the base of the ocean's food web, converting sunlight and carbon dioxide into organic matter through photosynthesis. They're eaten by small fish, which are eaten by larger fish, which are eaten by even larger predators. At each level of this food chain, waste products are produced. Dead organisms sink toward the ocean floor, their bodies decomposing as they fall. Fecal pellets from surface-dwelling creatures rain down like tiny organic meteors. This is your marine snow, the detritus of life that sustains you in the depths. But the connection goes deeper than just food. The deep ocean where you live plays a crucial role in regulating the Earth's climate. The water around you is part of a vast global circulation system that moves heat and nutrients around the planet. Cold, dense water sinks at the poles and flows along the ocean floor, carrying oxygen and nutrients to the deep sea. This water eventually rises to the surface in other parts of the world, bringing those nutrients back to the sunlit zones where they fuel new blooms of phytoplankton. You're part of this system, a tiny component in a machine that's been running for millions of years. Your metabolism, slow as it is, still processes carbon and other elements. When you die, your body will become part of the marine snow, feeding other deep-sea creatures and eventually contributing to the sediment that forms the ocean floor. Your existence is both insignificant and essential, a paradox that defines life in the deep ocean. The deep sea where you live is also a place of incredible diversity, home to creatures that seem almost alien in their adaptations to this harsh environment. There are fish with transparent heads and tubular eyes that can rotate to look upward, watching for the silhouettes of prey against the faint light filtering down from above. There are jellyfish that produce their own light, creating bioluminescent displays that can be seen for miles in the darkness. There are deep-sea anglerfish with lures that dangle in front of their mouths, emitting light to attract prey in the perpetual night of the abyss. Some of these creatures are your competitors, feeding on the same marine snow that sustains you. Others are potential predators, though few things in the deep ocean are fast enough or aggressive enough to pose a real threat to you. Your gelatinous body offers little nutrition, and your lack of hard parts makes you an unappealing target for most predators. In a way, your apparent weakness is your greatest strength. But even in this seemingly stable environment, change is constant. Ocean currents shift, carrying different nutrients and temperatures to your region. Seasonal variations at the surface affect the amount and type of marine snow that reaches you. El Niño and La Niña events can dramatically alter ocean conditions, changing the flow of nutrients and the distribution of marine life. These changes happen slowly, over months or years, but they can have profound effects on your survival. During particularly harsh periods, when marine snow is scarce and temperatures fluctuate, you enter a state of extreme metabolic suppression. Your already slow heartbeat becomes even slower. Your breathing nearly stops, and your body temperature drops to match the surrounding water. You become essentially dormant, a living fossil suspended in the deep ocean, waiting for conditions to improve. This ability to shut down your metabolism is one of your most remarkable adaptations. While surface-dwelling creatures would die within hours or days without food, you can survive for months in this suspended state. Your body breaks down its own tissues when necessary, metabolizing muscle and fat to keep your vital organs functioning. It's a desperate strategy, but it works. When conditions improve and marine snow becomes more abundant, you slowly wake up, your metabolism gradually returning to its normal, sluggish pace. The deep ocean is also a place where time moves differently. Without the daily cycle of light and dark that governs life at the surface, there's no clear distinction between day and night. Your internal clock, if you have one at all, is calibrated to much longer cycles, the seasonal variations in marine snow, or the longer-term change in ocean currents. Years pass without significant events. Decades blur together in the monotonous rhythm of survival. This timelessness is both a blessing and a curse. It allows you to live for over a century, to outlast countless generations of surface-dwelling creatures. But it also means that any change in your environment happens too quickly for you to adapt. Evolution in the deep ocean occurs over geological timescales, and your species has been essentially unchanged for millions of years. You're perfectly adapted to the stable conditions of the deep ocean, but this specialization makes you vulnerable to rapid environmental changes. The pressure at your depth is another constant presence in your life. Every square inch of your body is subjected to crushing force that would instantly kill most surface creatures, but you've never known anything else. The pressure isn't something you fight against, it's something you exist within. Your body has no air-filled spaces that could be compressed, no rigid structures that could be crushed. You are, in essence, a living liquid, shaped by the pressure around you. This pressure affects every aspect of your existence. It influences the chemical reactions in your body, the structure of your proteins, even the way your cells function. The enzymes that drive your metabolism are specially adapted to work under these extreme conditions. Your cell membranes are more flexible than those of surface creatures, allowing them to maintain their integrity under pressure. Even your DNA has adaptations that help it remain stable in this high-pressure environment. But perhaps the most profound effect of living under such extreme pressure is the way it shapes your relationship with depth. You can't simply swim upward if you want to change your location. Moving to shallower water would mean a dramatic decrease in pressure, and your body isn't equipped to handle such changes. The gases dissolved in your tissues would expand, potentially causing fatal damage. You're trapped in a narrow band of depth where the pressure is just right for your survival. So you've made it this far in your deep-sea existence, drifting through the endless darkness of the abyss, but now something truly terrifying is happening. Your ancient world is collapsing around you, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. The slow, steady rhythm of your life, unchanged for millions of years, is about to be shattered by forces you can't comprehend or escape. The first sign that something is wrong comes from above. You feel it before you see it, a massive disturbance in the water that sends vibrations through your gelatinous body. The seafloor beneath you trembles, and suddenly the water is filled with a chaos you've never experienced. Sediment clouds everything, turning your already dark world into a swirling nightmare of debris and destruction. This is deep-sea trawling, and it's ripping apart everything you've ever known. Enormous nets heavy enough to crush mountains, are being dragged across the ocean floor at depths that were once considered untouchable. These nets don't discriminate. They scoop up everything in their path. Ancient corals that have been growing for centuries, sponge gardens that have stood for millennia, and creatures like you who have no chance of escape. Your slow, methodical lifestyle, perfectly adapted for a world of patience and conservation, becomes a death sentence when faced with this industrial violence. The nets move faster than anything in your world ever has. While you might take hours to drift a few meters, these mechanical monsters cover kilometers in minutes, destroying in seconds what took nature thousands of years to build. You watch helplessly as the seafloor around you is stripped bare, centuries of accumulated marine snow scattered into the current, the delicate ecosystem you depend on obliterated in moments. But even if you somehow avoid the nets, the damage is already done. The habitat destruction is catastrophic. Those slow-growing deep-sea corals and sponges that provided structure to your world are gone, reduced to rubble. The careful balance of your ecosystem, built over geological timescales, is shattered. Food becomes even scarcer than before, and the places where you once found shelter and stability are now barren wastelands of disturbed sediment. The trawling doesn't just destroy what's there now, it prevents recovery for decades or even centuries to come. In the deep sea, everything grows slowly, reproduces slowly, recovers slowly. A single pass of a trawl net can set back an ecosystem for longer than human civilization has existed. And they're not making just one pass. They're coming back again and again, ensuring that nothing can ever recover. Then there's the pollution, and it's everywhere. You might think that living in the deepest parts of the ocean would protect you from human contamination, but you'd be wrong. The abyss has become a dumping ground for everything humanity doesn't want to deal with. Microplastics rain down on you like toxic snow, settling into the sediment you filter through your body, accumulating in your tissues with every meal. These plastic particles are so small, you can't avoid them. They're in the marine snow you depend on. They're in the bodies of every creature you might encounter. They're literally in the water itself. Every time you feed, you're ingesting more plastic, more chemicals, more toxins. Your body wasn't designed to process these artificial compounds. They build up in your tissues, disrupting your cellular functions, interfering with your metabolism, slowly poisoning you from the inside out. The chemical pollution is even worse. Industrial waste, agricultural runoff, pharmaceutical residues, all of it eventually finds its way to the deep sea. Heavy metals like mercury and lead accumulate in the food chain, becoming more concentrated at each level. By the time they reach you, they're at toxic levels that can damage your nervous system, impair your reproductive capabilities, and compromise your immune responses. These chemicals don't just affect you directly, they alter the entire ecosystem around you. The bacteria that break down organic matter are killed off by toxic compounds, disrupting the foundation of your food web. The delicate chemistry of the deep sea, stable for millions of years, is being thrown into chaos by substances that have no place in your world. Climate change is attacking you from multiple directions simultaneously. As the surface waters warm, the deep ocean circulation patterns that have remained constant throughout your evolutionary history are beginning to shift. The currents that bring nutrients to your habitat are changing, becoming less predictable, less reliable. Food sources that once arrived with clockwork regularity are now sporadic and uncertain. Ocean acidification is particularly devastating. As the oceans absorb more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, the water becomes more acidic. This doesn't just affect the chemistry of your environment, it directly impacts your physiology. Your body's delicate pH balance, fine-tuned over millions of years of evolution, is being disrupted. The shells and skeletons of the creatures you depend on for food are dissolving before they can even reach you. The temperature of your world is rising, and even small changes are catastrophic for a creature as specialized as you. Your enzymes, your cellular processes, your entire metabolism is calibrated for the near-freezing temperatures of the deep sea. A rise of just a few degrees can be lethal, causing your proteins to denature, your cellular structures to break down, your body to literally fall apart at the molecular level. Deoxygenation is creating dead zones in areas that were once rich with life. As warmer water holds less oxygen, and as increased bacterial activity consumes what little oxygen remains, vast areas of the deep sea are becoming uninhabitable. You're watching your world suffocate, and there's nowhere to run. The ocean zones that once supported life are becoming biological deserts. The noise pollution from shipping, sonar, and industrial activity is constant now, a never-ending assault on your sensitive vibration detection systems. The subtle signals you rely on to navigate, to find food, to sense danger, are being drowned out by the mechanical cacophony of human activity. You're becoming deaf in your own world, cut off from the sensory information that has guided your species for millions of years. Your reproductive cycle, already precarious, is being disrupted at every stage. The chemical pollutants in your body are interfering with hormone production, making it harder to reproduce successfully. The changing ocean conditions are affecting the survival of your larvae, which are even more vulnerable to environmental changes than you are. The long journey they must make through the changing water column is becoming increasingly deadly. The timing of your reproductive cycles, synchronized with seasonal patterns that have remained stable for millennia, is being thrown off by the rapidly changing environment. Food availability, temperature cycles, current patterns, all the environmental cues your species has relied on for successful reproduction are becoming unreliable. You're trying to breed in a world that no longer follows the rules your DNA expects. Even if you do manage to reproduce, your offspring face an environment far more hostile than the one you grew up in. The pollution levels are higher, the habitat destruction is more extensive, the climate disruption is accelerating. You're bringing young into a world that's actively trying to kill them, and there's nothing you can do to protect them. The deep sea mining that's beginning to target your habitat represents perhaps the ultimate threat. Massive machines are being designed to strip mine the seafloor, extracting metals and minerals from the very sediments you call home. This isn't just habitat destruction, it's the complete annihilation of your world. The mining operations will scrape away the top layers of the seafloor, destroying not just the current ecosystem, but removing the foundation for any future recovery. The sediment clouds created by deep sea mining will persist for months or even years, choking the life out of vast areas of the ocean floor. The noise from the mining operations will be audible across entire ocean basins, disrupting marine life thousands of kilometers away. And unlike trawling, which at least allows some possibility of recovery, mining will leave permanent scars on the seafloor that will be visible for geological ages. Your species' greatest strength, your incredible specialization for life in the deep sea, has become your greatest weakness. You can't adapt quickly enough to keep up with the pace of change. Your slow metabolism, your low reproductive rate, your narrow environmental tolerances, all the traits that made you perfectly suited for the stable deep sea environment are now pushing you toward extinction. The changes happening to your world aren't happening over the millions of years that evolution requires for adaptation. They're happening over decades, over years, over months. Your species has no time to evolve, no time to adapt, no time to find new strategies for survival. You're being left behind by a world that's changing faster than life can keep up with. And perhaps most tragically, you're disappearing before humanity even knows you exist. The deep sea is the least explored environment on Earth, and countless species are going extinct before they're ever discovered. Your ancient lineage, your unique adaptations, your role in the deep sea ecosystem, all of it is being erased from existence, with barely anyone noticing. The deep sea that gave birth to life on Earth, that served as a refuge during mass extinctions, that harbored the planet's most ancient and mysterious creatures, is being systematically destroyed, and you, as one of its most specialized inhabitants, are among the first to feel the full force of that destruction. Your life as a blobfish is ending not with the quiet dignity of old age, but with the violent chaos of a world in collapse. You've been drifting in this crushing darkness for years now, your gelatinous body perfectly adapted to a world that most creatures could never survive. But adaptation has its limits, and those limits are being tested in ways your ancient lineage never faced. The deep ocean isn't just changing, it's being reshaped by forces that move faster than evolution itself. Your world operates on geological timescales. Changes happen slowly, predictably, over millions of years. Your ancestors had time to adapt, to evolve, to find their place in this stable ecosystem. But the changes happening now are different. They're rapid, violent, and they're accelerating. The water around you is warming. Not dramatically, not in a way that would be noticeable to creatures living in the chaotic surface world, but down here, where temperatures have remained constant for millennia, even a degree of change is catastrophic. Your metabolism, already operating at the absolute minimum to conserve energy, struggles to cope with the increased heat. Your body chemistry, fine-tuned over millions of years, begins to falter. The warming water holds less oxygen. This is a problem that compounds on itself because the marine snow that feeds your ecosystem depends on oxygen-rich water to support the microscopic organisms that create it. Less oxygen means less food, and less food means starvation in an environment where every calorie is already precious. But the warming is just the beginning. The chemistry of the water itself is changing. The ocean is becoming more acidic as it absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere above. This acidification dissolves the shells and skeletons of the tiny creatures that form the base of your food web. The calcium carbonate structures that have supported deep sea life for millions of years are literally dissolving. Your sensory organs, evolved to detect the faintest chemical traces in the water, are being overwhelmed by new compounds. Microplastics drift down from the surface like toxic snow, carrying with them a cocktail of chemicals that your body has no mechanism to process. These particles are small enough to pass through your digestive system, but they don't pass through unchanged. They accumulate, building up in your tissues, disrupting your already delicate biological processes. The noise is unbearable. Your world was once silent except for the subtle vibrations of life itself, the movement of water currents, the distant rumble of underwater geological activity. Now the water carries sounds that have no place in the deep ocean. The constant drone of ship engines, the explosive booms of seismic surveys, the mechanical grinding of deep-sea mining equipment. These sounds travel for thousands of kilometers through the water, disrupting the chemical communication systems that you and your prey depend on. Your hunting strategy, perfected over millions of years, is failing. The vibrations that once told you when prey was nearby are now masked by industrial noise. The chemical trails that guided you to food sources are corrupted by pollutants. The bioluminescent signals that helped you navigate the darkness are interfered with by artificial lights from deep-sea equipment. The very seafloor beneath you is being torn apart. Deep-sea mining operations are strip mining the abyssal plains, destroying habitats that took millions of years to develop. The sediment clouds they create can be seen from space, and they smother everything in their path. Your ecosystem depends on the slow, steady accumulation of organic matter from above, but the mining operations bury that organic matter under tons of disturbed sediment. Your reproductive cycle, already precarious in this low-energy environment, is being disrupted. The chemical signals that help you find mates are being interfered with by pollutants. The hormones that regulate your reproductive system are being disrupted by endocrine-disrupting chemicals that have found their way into the deepest parts of the ocean. The eggs you might produce, if you can produce them at all, face an uncertain future in water that is warmer, more acidic, and less oxygen-rich than the water you were born in. The food web that supports you is collapsing from the bottom up. The microscopic organisms that create marine snow are dying off in unprecedented numbers. The small crustaceans and worms that form the next level of the food chain are starving. The fish that occasionally drift down to your depths are carrying toxins in their flesh that make them dangerous to eat. Invasive species, transported by human activities, are arriving in your deep-sea environment. These are creatures that evolved in different conditions, with different strategies, and they're disrupting the delicate balance of your ecosystem. They compete for the same scarce resources, but they're better adapted to the changing conditions. They're faster, more aggressive, more efficient at exploiting the limited food sources. Your immune system, evolved for a stable environment with predictable threats, is being overwhelmed. New pathogens are appearing, carried by the warming water and the invasive species. Your body's defenses, already operating at minimum energy levels, can't cope with these new challenges. The pressure that has been constant for millions of years is changing. Deep-sea mining operations and underwater construction projects are creating pressure waves that travel through the water. These pressure changes affect your gas-filled swim bladder, the organ that helps you maintain neutral buoyancy. The pressure changes can cause this organ to expand or contract rapidly, leading to internal injuries that would be fatal in an environment where healing requires enormous amounts of energy. Your species has survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and mass extinctions. You've persisted through changes that wiped out most other forms of life on Earth. But those changes happened over geological timescales. They gave evolution time to work, time for adaptation, time for new solutions to emerge. The changes happening now are different. They're happening faster than your generation time, faster than genetic adaptation can occur. Your species is being pushed toward extinction, not by a single catastrophic event, but by the cumulative effect of thousands of human activities that are altering the fundamental chemistry and physics of your environment. You drift through this changing world, your ancient body struggling to cope with conditions that no blobfish has ever faced. Your nervous system, simple though it is, registers the stress of an environment that is becoming increasingly hostile. Your metabolism slows even further as your body tries to conserve energy for basic survival functions. The deep ocean was once Earth's most stable environment. Now it's becoming a toxic wasteland where the rules of life that have governed your existence for millions of years no longer apply. You're not just facing extinction, you're facing the complete destruction of the ecosystem that created you and sustained you for countless generations. Your story is not unique. Throughout the deep ocean, species that have existed for millions of years are facing the same impossible challenge. Ancient lineages that survived the great extinction events of the past are disappearing, not because they're unfit for their environment, but because their environment is disappearing beneath them. The deep ocean is being transformed into something alien, something that cannot support the life forms that evolved there. And unlike the great extinctions of the past, this one is happening too fast for life to adapt, too fast for evolution to find new solutions, too fast for hope. You drift through the endless darkness, your gelatinous body pulsing with each subtle current that carries you along the seafloor. The water around you is thick with the crushing weight of 3 kilometers of ocean pressing down from above. But this pressure isn't your enemy anymore. It's your ally. Your body has become one with it. Every cell adapted to this incredible force that would instantly crush any surface dweller. You are no longer the creature you once were in your youth. The decades have taught you patience, efficiency, and above all, survival. The temperature hovers just above freezing, a constant 2 degrees Celsius that never changes. Your metabolism has slowed to match this perpetual cold, burning energy so efficiently that a single meal can sustain you for weeks. You don't fight the environment down here, you become part of it. Your translucent flesh ripples gently as you move, not through any effort of your own, but carried by the deep ocean currents that serve as your highway through this alien world. You've been drifting for hours now, maybe days, and time moves differently at these depths. Your primitive nervous system doesn't track minutes or hours the way surface creatures do. Instead, you exist in a state of perpetual awareness, always ready to respond to the chemical signals that tell you when food is near. Your mouth opens and closes rhythmically, filtering the water for any organic particles that might sustain you. Most of the time, you catch nothing. But patience is all you have, and patience is all you need. The marine snow continues to fall around you like a gentle blizzard of death and decay. Each flake represents life from the surface world, microscopic organisms, and larger creatures that have died and begun their long journey to the bottom. Some of these particles are fresh, having fallen for only days or weeks. Others have been sinking for months, breaking down and decomposing as they descend through the water column. By the time they reach you, they're often just fragments of what they once were, but they're still food, still energy, still life. Your body has evolved to make the most of every calorie. Unlike the frantic, energy-burning creatures of the surface, you waste nothing. Every movement is calculated. Every action serves a purpose. You don't chase your food. You position yourself in the path of the currents and let the food come to you. Your oversized mouth can expand to accommodate prey much larger than yourself, and your stomach can stretch to hold meals that might not come again for weeks or months. The darkness around you is complete, but you don't rely on sight the way surface creatures do. Your body is covered in sensory organs that detect the slightest changes in water pressure, temperature, and chemical composition. You can sense the approach of other creatures from hundreds of meters away, reading the water like a book written in vibrations and molecular traces. When something dies nearby, you know it immediately. The smell of decay carries far in these depths, and you follow it like a bloodhound following a scent trail. Today brings something different. The water carries a new signal, stronger than the usual background noise of settling debris. Something large has died above you, and its remains are sinking toward the seafloor. You adjust your position slightly, expending just enough energy to place yourself in the path of this windfall. Other creatures are responding to the same signal. You're not alone in these depths. Though encounters with others of your kind are rare, a massive shape emerges from the darkness above, falling slowly through the water column like a biological meteor. It's the carcass of a whale, its body already partially decomposed from its journey through the warmer waters above. This is the jackpot, the kind of meal that can sustain an entire ecosystem for years. The whale fall will become an oasis in this desert of the deep, supporting countless organisms through its slow decomposition. You're not the first to arrive. Other deep-sea creatures have already begun their work. Hagfish writhe through the whale's flesh, boring tunnels through its body and feeding from the inside out. Crabs scuttle across its surface, tearing away chunks of blubber and meat. The whale's body is alive with activity, a feeding frenzy in slow motion that will continue for months or even years. You position yourself near the carcass and begin to feed. Your mouth opens wide, engulfing chunks of whale flesh that drift away from the main body. The meat is rich with fats and proteins, more nutrition than you've encountered in months. You don't gorge yourself. That would be wasteful and dangerous. Instead, you feed methodically, taking what you need and saving your energy for the long stretches between meals that will inevitably come. The whale fall attracts more than just scavengers. Predators patrol the edges of the feeding frenzy, looking for opportunities to catch smaller creatures distracted by the feast. You remain vigilant even as you feed, your senses constantly monitoring the water around you for threats. A six-gill shark glides past, its ancient form perfectly adapted to these depths. It's not interested in you. You're too small and too gelatinous to be worth the energy expenditure, but you freeze anyway, letting it pass without acknowledging your presence. Days pass, or perhaps weeks. Time becomes meaningless when you're feeding on such abundance. The whale's body slowly transforms, its flesh consumed and its bones exposed. But even the bones will provide sustenance, their marrow rich with lipids that will feed specialized bacteria and worms for years to come. You've taken what you need from this bounty, storing energy in your tissues for the lean times ahead. Eventually, you drift away from the whale fall, carried by currents toward new territories. The ocean floor stretches endlessly in all directions, a vast plain of sediment and scattered debris. You pass over ancient formations, underwater mountains and valleys carved by currents over millions of years. The landscape is alien and beautiful in its own way, shaped by forces completely different from those that sculpt the surface world. You encounter others of your kind occasionally, silent meetings in the darkness where you acknowledge each other's presence before continuing on your separate ways. There's no social structure here, no complex interactions or communications. You exist as individuals, each pursuing your own survival in this harsh environment. Sometimes you detect the chemical traces of potential mates, following pheromone trails through the water in the hopes of reproduction. These encounters are brief and functional, driven by biology rather than any emotional connection. The seasons change far above you, but down here the environment remains constant, the same crushing pressure, the same frigid temperature, the same eternal darkness. You've adapted to this consistency, your body and behavior finely tuned to extract every possible advantage from this challenging habitat. You are a master of efficiency, a creature that has solved the puzzle of survival in one of Earth's most demanding environments. Your body shows the effects of your long life. Scars from encounters with predators mark your flesh, evidence of battles fought and survived. Your tissues have accumulated trace amounts of heavy metals and other pollutants, substances that shouldn't exist in these pristine depths, but somehow find their way down from the surface world. These contaminants build up in your body over decades, a toxic legacy of human activity that reaches even into the deepest parts of the ocean. You continue your endless journey through the abyss, a living testament to the power of adaptation and persistence. Your existence is simple but profound, a reminder that life finds a way to thrive even in the most unlikely places. You are ancient and timeless, a creature whose ancestors have inhabited these depths for millions of years, witnessing the rise and fall of countless species on the surface far above. The deep ocean holds its secrets close, and you are one of them, a strange and wonderful creature perfectly adapted to an environment that would kill most other forms of life instantly. You are the Blobfish, master of the deep, survivor of the abyss, and guardian of mysteries that the surface world is only beginning to understand. The threats to your existence are accelerating at a pace that defies comprehension. For millions of years, your species has adapted to gradual changes, evolutionary pressures that unfolded over geological timescales. But now, within the span of a single human lifetime, the very foundations of your world are crumbling. The changes happening today are not just fast, they're catastrophically fast, and your ancient biology has no answer for them. Consider the sheer scale of what's happening above you. Every day, massive industrial vessels drag nets across the seafloor, scraping away entire ecosystems that took centuries to develop. These trawling operations don't just catch fish, they obliterate everything in their path. The sediment clouds they create can travel for miles, choking filter feeders and disrupting the delicate chemistry of the water column. When a trawling net passes through your habitat, it's like a tornado ripping through a city. Nothing survives intact. But the physical destruction is just the beginning. The ocean itself is becoming hostile to life. Carbon dioxide from human activities doesn't just warm the atmosphere, it dissolves into seawater, creating carbonic acid. Ocean acidification is happening 3 times faster than it has in the past 300 million years. For creatures like you, whose bodies depend on precise chemical balances, this is a death sentence delivered in slow motion. Your proteins denature, your cellular processes fail, and your ability to sense the world around you deteriorates. The temperature changes are equally devastating. Your metabolism is calibrated for the stable, near-freezing temperatures of the deep ocean. When the water warms by even a few degrees, your body cannot cope. You cannot sweat, you cannot pant, you cannot migrate to cooler waters. You simply begin to die, your organs shutting down one by one as the heat overwhelms your biological systems. Meanwhile, the noise pollution from shipping, offshore drilling, and sonar testing has turned the ocean into a cacophony of industrial sound. The low-frequency vibrations that you rely on for navigation and communication are drowned out by the constant rumble of ship engines and the explosive blasts of seismic surveys. You're essentially being deafened and blinded simultaneously, cut off from the sensory world that has guided your species for millions of years. Plastic pollution adds another layer of horror to your existence. Microplastics are now found in every corner of the ocean, from the surface to the deepest trenches. These tiny fragments don't just float harmlessly in the water, they accumulate in your tissues, blocking your digestive system and releasing toxic chemicals into your bloodstream. You're being poisoned from the inside out by materials that will persist in the environment long after your species has vanished. The food web that sustains you is collapsing from multiple directions. Overfishing has removed the large predators whose carcasses once provided feast or famine nutrition for deep-sea communities. Climate change is altering ocean currents, disrupting the flow of nutrients that supports marine snow production. The tiny organisms at the base of the food chain are dying off, victims of acidification and temperature changes, leaving you with less and less to eat. Chemical pollution from industrial runoff, agricultural pesticides, and pharmaceutical waste creates dead zones where nothing can survive. These chemicals don't stay where they're dumped. They spread through ocean currents, accumulating in the tissues of deep-sea creatures. Heavy metals, persistent organic pollutants, and endocrine disruptors interfere with your reproduction, your development, and your basic physiological functions. Deep-sea mining represents perhaps the most immediate existential threat to your species. Companies are now targeting the abyssal plains and seamounts where you live, planning to scrape away entire ecosystems to extract metals for batteries and electronics. The mining operations will destroy habitat that took millions of years to develop, creating sediment plumes that will smother everything for hundreds of miles around. There will be no recovery, no regeneration, just permanent devastation. Your reproductive cycle, already precarious in the harsh deep-sea environment, cannot withstand these multiple stressors. The females of your species produce relatively few eggs, and the development time is long. When environmental conditions deteriorate, reproduction fails. Young blobfish die before they can mature, and the population begins its inexorable slide toward extinction. The interconnected nature of these threats means that addressing one problem is not enough. Even if trawling were banned tomorrow, the acidification would continue. Even if carbon emissions were eliminated, the plastic pollution would persist. Even if the noise pollution stopped, the chemical contamination would remain. Your species is caught in a web of environmental destruction that tightens with each passing year. What makes this tragedy even more profound is that most humans don't even know you exist. The deep ocean is out of sight and out of mind for most people. The destruction of your habitat generates no headlines, no protests, no conservation campaigns. You're disappearing in silence, along with thousands of other deep-sea species that have never been studied or even discovered. The few scientists who do study the deep ocean are watching in horror as ecosystems they've spent their careers documenting simply vanish. Research sites that were teeming with life just decades ago are now barren wastelands. The rate of change is so rapid that scientific understanding cannot keep pace with the destruction. Your species represents an evolutionary experiment that has been running for millions of years, a unique solution to the challenges of deep-sea life. When you go extinct, that experiment ends forever. The genetic information, the behavioral adaptations, the ecological relationships, all of it disappears. Evolution will not produce another blobfish. The conditions that created you are gone, replaced by an environment that is hostile to complex life. The deep ocean, once the most stable environment on Earth, has become a battlefield where ancient life forms face modern industrial civilization. It's a battle you cannot win. Your evolutionary strategy of slow living, minimal energy expenditure, and patient waiting is no match for the speed and scale of human impact. You're adapted for a world that no longer exists, and the world that's replacing it has no place for you. The statistics are staggering. In less than a century, human activity has fundamentally altered ocean chemistry faster than any natural process in millions of years. The pH of seawater has dropped by 0.1 units since the Industrial Revolution, which sounds small until you realize that pH is logarithmic. This represents a 30% increase in acidity. For creatures like you, whose entire existence depends on maintaining precise chemical balance within your gelatinous body, this shift is catastrophic. Your body is essentially a living chemical reaction. The proteins that hold your structure together, the enzymes that process what little food you can find, the delicate membranes that separate your internal fluids from the crushing ocean around you, all of these biological systems evolved over millions of years to function within very specific chemical parameters. When the ocean becomes more acidic, these systems begin to fail. The acidification doesn't just affect you directly, it cascades through every level of your ecosystem. The microscopic organisms that form the base of your food web, creatures so small they're invisible to the naked eye, begin to dissolve. Their calcium carbonate shells, built over generations, start to weaken and crumble. These tiny creatures are your lifeline, the foundation upon which your entire world depends, and they're disappearing at an unprecedented rate. But the chemical assault doesn't stop there. The ocean is also warming at a pace that would have been unimaginable to your ancestors. Deep sea temperatures, which remained stable for millions of years, are rising. This might sound beneficial for a creature living in the cold depths, but temperature changes in the deep ocean create problems that go far beyond simple comfort. As water warms, it holds less dissolved oxygen. The oxygen levels in your habitat, already limited, begin to drop even further. You find yourself in an environment where breathing becomes increasingly difficult, where the basic act of extracting oxygen from water requires more energy than your slow metabolism can provide. The irony is crushing. The very substance you need to survive is being stripped away by the changing conditions above. The warming water also creates something called thermal stratification. The surface waters, heating up faster than the depths, form distinct layers that don't mix as readily. This disrupts the ancient circulation patterns that have brought nutrients down to your world for millions of years. The deep ocean currents that once carried food and oxygen to your habitat slow down, stagnate, and in some cases stop entirely. Your world is becoming a desert, not the hot, sandy kind, but a cold, empty wasteland where life struggles to find the basic resources it needs to survive. The nutrients that once drifted down from the surface in a steady rain of organic matter are now trapped in the upper layers of the ocean. The deep sea, once a repository of life adapted to scarcity, is becoming genuinely barren. The changes aren't just chemical and physical, they're biological too. The carefully balanced relationships between species that took millions of years to establish are unraveling. Predator-prey relationships collapse when one species can no longer tolerate the changing conditions. Symbiotic partnerships fall apart when the delicate chemical signals that coordinate them are disrupted by the altered ocean chemistry. You're witnessing the breakdown of an entire ecosystem, but as a blobfish, you can't simply swim away to find better conditions. Your body is built for a specific depth, a specific pressure, a specific environment. You can't migrate to shallower waters because the pressure difference would kill you. You can't move to different ocean basins because the distances are too vast and the journey would exhaust your limited energy reserves. The toxic pollutants that rain down from the surface add another layer of complexity to your struggle. Heavy metals accumulate in your tissues, disrupting your nervous system and interfering with your ability to process food. Plastics, broken down into microscopic particles, clog your digestive system and leach chemicals into your bloodstream. Pesticides and industrial chemicals designed to kill life don't discriminate between their intended targets and innocent bystanders like you. These toxins don't just affect you individually. They accumulate up the food chain, becoming more concentrated at each level. The few larger predators that remain in your ecosystem carry massive loads of these chemicals, and when they die, their bodies release concentrated doses of toxins back into the environment. Your world is becoming a toxic soup, and there's nowhere to escape. The noise pollution from human activities adds yet another stressor to your already overwhelming situation. The deep ocean, once a place of profound silence, broken only by the occasional sounds of geological activity or marine life, is now filled with the constant din of ship engines, sonar pings, and industrial machinery. These sounds disrupt your ability to sense your environment, to locate food, and to avoid the few remaining predators. The cumulative effect of all these changes is a phenomenon scientists call a regime shift. Your ecosystem isn't just being modified, it's being fundamentally transformed into something entirely different. The stable, predictable environment that supported your species for millions of years is disappearing, replaced by a chaotic, hostile world where the rules of survival have completely changed. What makes this transformation particularly tragic is its speed. Evolution, the process that created your remarkable adaptations to deep-sea life, operates over millions of years. The changes in your environment are happening over decades. There's simply no time for you or your species to adapt. The gap between the rate of environmental change and the rate of evolutionary response is unbridgeable. Your reproductive cycle, already precarious in the best of times, becomes nearly impossible under these new conditions. The chemical cues that trigger mating behaviors are disrupted by the altered ocean chemistry. The specific temperature and pressure conditions required for your eggs to develop properly no longer exist in many areas. Even if you manage to reproduce, your offspring face an environment far more hostile than anything your species has ever encountered. The few scientists who study creatures like you are racing against time to document what's being lost. They're cataloging species that are disappearing before they can even be properly described. They're watching ecosystems collapse in real time, recording the end of evolutionary stories that took millions of years to write. Their research vessels return from the deep with samples from a world that's vanishing beneath the waves. But their work, however dedicated, can't capture the full scope of what's happening. The deep ocean is vast, largely unexplored, and changing so rapidly that scientific understanding can't keep pace. By the time researchers identify a new species or ecosystem, it may already be gone. The rate of discovery is being outpaced by the rate of extinction. The human impact on your world continues to accelerate, and the consequences are stacking up faster than your species can adapt. You've survived for millions of years in an environment that barely changed, but now everything is shifting at breakneck speed. The water around you is getting warmer, more acidic, and more toxic with each passing year. The pressure that once protected you from the surface world can't shield you from the chemicals that sink down from above. Your feeding grounds are disappearing. The organic matter that drifts down from the surface is changing composition. Instead of the steady rain of dead plankton and marine snow that your ancestors relied on, you're getting more plastic fragments, industrial chemicals, and other synthetic materials that your body can't process. You try to filter feed on this debris because your instincts tell you to, but these foreign substances accumulate in your tissues, disrupting your already fragile biological processes. The mining operations are getting closer. You can feel the vibrations through the water as massive machines scrape across the seafloor, destroying everything in their path. The sediment clouds they create block out what little light filters down from above, and the noise interferes with your ability to sense your environment. When the mining ships move through your territory, they leave behind a wasteland of churned mud and toxic runoff that takes decades to settle. Your reproductive cycles are being disrupted. The chemical cocktail in the water is interfering with your hormonal systems, making it harder for you to find mates and successfully reproduce. The eggs you do manage to produce often don't develop properly, and the few offspring that survive face an even more hostile environment than the one you grew up in. Each generation is smaller and weaker than the last. The deep sea ecosystem that supported your species for millions of years is collapsing. The other creatures you depend on for food and ecosystem services are disappearing. The bacteria that break down organic matter are being poisoned by heavy metals and industrial chemicals. The currents that bring nutrients and oxygen to your habitat are being disrupted by climate change. Even the basic chemistry of seawater is changing as the ocean absorbs more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. You're not just dealing with one threat, but a combination of multiple stressors that compound each other. The warming water makes you more vulnerable to toxins. The acidification weakens your already soft body structure. The pollution reduces your ability to fight off diseases. The noise pollution from shipping and industrial activity interferes with your sensory systems. Each individual impact might not be enough to kill you, but together they create a cascade of effects that overwhelm your ability to cope. The speed of these changes is unprecedented in your species' history. Evolution equipped you to handle gradual environmental shifts over geological timescales, but the human-induced changes are happening in decades rather than millennia. Your body's adaptations that worked perfectly for millions of years are now liabilities. Your slow metabolism, which helped you survive in a low-energy environment, means you can't quickly adapt to new conditions. Your specialized body structure, which made you perfectly suited for deep-sea life, can't cope with the rapid changes in water chemistry and temperature. The deep ocean, once a refuge from the chaos of surface waters, is now becoming just as hostile as any other marine environment. The crushing pressure that kept surface predators away can't protect you from microscopic pollutants. The isolation that allowed your ecosystem to develop its own unique characteristics now means you have nowhere to retreat as conditions deteriorate. You're trapped in a habitat that's becoming uninhabitable. Your species is facing what scientists call an extinction debt. The damage has already been done, but the full consequences won't be visible for years or decades. The pollutants accumulating in your tissues will continue to cause problems throughout your long lifespan. The disrupted food webs will take generations to recover. If they ever do, the habitat destruction will leave permanent scars on the seafloor ecosystem. Even if humans stopped all harmful activities tomorrow, your species would still face an uncertain future. The tragedy is that most humans don't even know you exist. Your species lives so far from their world that your struggle for survival is invisible to them. There are no nature documentaries about your daily life, no conservation campaigns to protect your habitat, no public outcry when your populations decline. You're disappearing silently in the darkness of the deep ocean, while the human world above continues its relentless exploitation of marine resources. Your ancient lineage, which survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and mass extinctions, may not survive the current human-dominated era. The same intelligence and technology that allowed humans to discover your existence is also driving the changes that threaten your survival. The deep-sea trawling nets that first brought your species to scientific attention are the same tools that are destroying your habitat. The industrial processes that enable human civilization are the same ones that are poisoning your world. The story of your species is becoming a cautionary tale about the far-reaching consequences of human activity. Even in the most remote corners of the planet, in the deepest parts of the ocean where no human has ever set foot, the impacts of human civilization are reshaping entire ecosystems. Your struggle for survival in the depths is a stark reminder that no corner of the natural world is immune to human influence, and that the consequences of environmental destruction extend far beyond what most people can see or imagine. as the crushing weight of the deep ocean becomes your permanent reality. You begin to understand that survival here depends on one simple truth. You are not the master of your fate. The decisions that determine whether you live or die are being made thousands of meters above you in a world you will never see by creatures you will never encounter. This is the harsh reality of life as a blobfish in the 21st century. Your species survived for millions of years by perfecting the art of existing in balance with your environment. You evolved to thrive in conditions that would instantly kill most other life forms. Your gelatinous body, your slow metabolism, your patient hunting style, everything about you was crafted by evolution to succeed in this specific place. But now that very specialization has become your greatest weakness. The deep ocean is changing faster than you can adapt. The water around you is becoming more acidic, dissolving the shells of the creatures you depend on for food. The temperature is rising, reducing the oxygen levels that already hover at the edge of what you can survive. Chemical compounds that never existed in nature are now flowing through your bloodstream, disrupting the delicate biological processes that keep you alive. But perhaps the most devastating change is the one you cannot see or feel directly. Far above you, massive nets are being dragged across the seafloor, destroying in minutes what took centuries to build. The rocky outcroppings where you rest are being scraped away. The coral gardens where smaller fish shelter are being reduced to rubble. The complex three-dimensional habitat that supports your entire food web is being flattened into a biological desert. You have no way to understand what is happening. Your simple nervous system cannot process the concept of industrial fishing or climate change. You cannot comprehend that the disruption to your world is the side effect of human activities taking place in an entirely different realm. You only know that food is becoming scarcer, that the water tastes different, that the vibrations in the ocean have changed. The mining operations that are just beginning to target the deep sea represent a new level of threat. The machines that will soon descend to your depth are designed to extract minerals from the seafloor, but they will also destroy everything in their path. The sediment clouds they create will clog your gills and bury your food sources. The noise they generate will overwhelm your ability to sense your environment. The toxic chemicals they release will poison the water you breathe. Your reproduction cycle, already slow and vulnerable, becomes even more precarious as your environment deteriorates. The eggs. You might lay face an uncertain future in water that is increasingly hostile to life. The larvae that do hatch will struggle to find food in an ecosystem that is collapsing around them. Each generation faces worse conditions than the last, and there is no evolutionary pressure that can prepare them for changes happening this rapidly. The deep sea ecosystem you inhabit is like a house of cards, with each species depending on others in ways that are invisible but essential. When the foundation species disappear, everything built on top of them collapses. The bacteria that process organic matter, the small invertebrates that feed on them, the fish that eat those invertebrates, the larger predators that control population dynamics, all of these relationships are being severed simultaneously. You are witnessing the end of an ancient world. The deep ocean that has remained relatively stable for millions of years is transforming into something entirely different. The changes are happening so quickly that there is no time for adaptation, no opportunity for evolution to find new solutions. Species that took millions of years to develop are disappearing within decades. The irony is that humans are only just beginning to discover the incredible diversity of life in the deep ocean. New species are being identified faster than they can be studied, but many of them are already extinct, before science has a chance to understand their role in the ecosystem. You might be one of these species, living and dying in anonymity, while the world above remains completely unaware of your existence. As plastic particles, smaller than your eyes can detect, accumulate in your tissues, as chemical pollutants alter your hormonal systems, as the pH of your environment shifts beyond the range your species can tolerate, you continue to do what your ancestors have done for millions of years. You hover in the water column, waiting for food to drift within reach. You conserve energy with every movement. You exist in the perpetual darkness, adapted to a world that no longer exists. But even as your individual life draws to a close, the larger tragedy continues. The deep ocean is becoming a graveyard for species that evolved over geological timescales but cannot adapt to changes happening within human lifetimes. The silence that follows is not the peaceful quiet of the deep sea, but the absence of life itself. Your story is not unique. Across the deep ocean, countless species are facing the same fate. The giant tube worms that cluster around hydrothermal vents, the ancient sharks that patrol the abyssal plains, the bizarre creatures that have never been seen by human eyes, all of them are struggling against the same overwhelming forces. The deep sea, once the most stable environment on Earth, has become the front line of a global extinction crisis. The most tragic aspect of your fate is that it could have been prevented. The technologies exist to reduce the impact of human activities on the deep ocean. The knowledge exists to understand how these ecosystems function and what they need to survive. But the will to act on that knowledge, to make the difficult choices necessary to protect a world that few humans will ever see, that remains as elusive as the creatures that inhabit these depths. And so you continue your ancient dance with the currents, unaware that you are among the last of your kind, unaware that the world you inhabit is already gone. Life as a blobfish in the modern age is not just about surviving in the deep ocean anymore. It is about bearing witness to the end of an era, about existing in the shadow of changes so vast and rapid that they dwarf even the crushing pressure of the deep sea itself. The consequences of these mounting pressures are already manifesting in ways that would have been unimaginable to your ancient lineage. Your reproductive cycles, once synchronized with the subtle rhythms of deep-sea currents and seasonal variations in marine snow, now face a constant disruption. The chemical cocktail coursing through your tissues interferes with hormone production, making successful mating increasingly unlikely. Even when reproduction does occur, the eggs you produce carry the burden of accumulated toxins, often failing to develop properly or producing offspring with compromised survival abilities. Your feeding patterns have become erratic as the very foundation of your food web crumbles. The steady rain of organic matter that once sustained your kind has been replaced by an unpredictable mixture of actual nutrients and synthetic debris. Your specialized digestive system, evolved to extract maximum energy from sparse but consistent food sources, struggles to process the foreign materials that now dominate your environment. Microplastics lodge in your tissues, creating false signals of satiation while providing no nutritional value, slowly starving you even as your stomach feels full. The noise pollution that now permeates your world has transformed what was once a realm of subtle acoustic cues into a cacophony of confusion. The low-frequency vibrations from shipping traffic, seismic surveys, and industrial operations mask the delicate sounds that once guided your movements and feeding behaviors. Your ability to detect the gentle impacts of marine snow or the subtle chemical gradients that indicate food sources has been compromised by this constant acoustic assault. What was once a finely tuned sensory system now operates in a state of perpetual sensory overload. Temperature fluctuations, once virtually non-existent in your stable deep-sea environment, now subject your body to stresses it has never encountered. Even minor increases in water temperature cause your already minimal metabolic processes to accelerate beyond sustainable levels, forcing you to expend energy reserves you cannot replace. Your gelatinous tissues, perfectly calibrated for the eternal cold of the deep, begin to break down under these thermal stresses, compromising your ability to maintain buoyancy and structural integrity. The acidification of your environment attacks you at the molecular level, altering the chemistry of the water that flows through your tissues. Your simple but effective physiological processes, dependent on precise chemical balances maintained over millions of years, falter as the ocean's pH continues to drop. The very water that gives you life now carries the seeds of your destruction, slowly dissolving the delicate chemical equilibriums that keep your body functioning. Perhaps most tragically, your species lacks the biological tools necessary to adapt to these rapid changes. Your extremely slow reproductive rate, once an advantage in your stable environment, now becomes a fatal liability. While other organisms might theoretically evolve responses to new challenges over dozens of generations, your kind reproduces so infrequently that meaningful genetic adaptation is impossible within any relevant time frame. The changes occurring in your environment are happening in decades, while your species requires centuries to show even minor evolutionary responses. The isolation that once protected your kind now ensures your doom. Living in the deep ocean's remote reaches, you have no refuge to flee to, no alternative habitats to colonize. Your entire existence is tied to a specific set of environmental conditions that are rapidly disappearing. Unlike surface species that might migrate to more favorable areas, you are trapped in a shrinking world of viable habitat, watching your living space contract around you with each passing year. Your situation exemplifies the broader crisis facing deep-sea ecosystems worldwide. Scientists estimate that less than 5% of the deep ocean has been explored, meaning that countless species like yourself are disappearing before humanity even knows they exist. The deep sea, once considered too remote and harsh for human impact, now bears the cumulative weight of surface activities. Every piece of plastic discarded thousands of miles away eventually settles into your realm. Every ton of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere eventually acidifies your water. Every ship crossing the ocean above adds to the acoustic chaos that disrupts your world. The irony is profound. Your species has survived mass extinctions, ice ages, and cosmic catastrophes that wiped out the dinosaurs and reshaped life on Earth. You have persisted through changes that eliminated countless other lineages. Your conservative lifestyle and deep-sea sanctuary, providing protection from the tumultuous events that periodically reset life on the planet's surface. Yet now, faced with the rapid environmental changes driven by a single species that has existed for a mere fraction of your evolutionary history, your ancient survival strategies have become inadequate. The timescales involved make your predicament particularly heartbreaking. Your species thinks in geological time, with individuals living for decades and evolutionary changes occurring over millions of years. But the forces now arrayed against you operate on human timescales, with devastating changes occurring faster than you can perceive, let alone respond to. From your perspective, the world is ending in an instant, with no time to adapt or escape. This is your reality as a blobfish in the 21st century. You are witnessing the collapse of one of Earth's most ancient and stable ecosystems, experiencing the end of a way of life that has persisted since before complex life colonized the land. Your story is being repeated millions of times over across the deep ocean as species after species succumbs to the cascading effects of human activity. You are not just facing extinction, you are experiencing the dissolution of an entire world, the end of the deep sea as it has existed for hundreds of millions of years. As the years pile on, you've become a master of this world. Your body has adapted to things that would kill most surface dwellers in seconds. You've survived decades in conditions that humans can barely comprehend, let alone endure. Your metabolism has slowed to a crawl, your reproductive cycles have stretched across seasons, and your entire existence has become a testament to the power of evolutionary patience. But here's the thing about being perfectly adapted to one of the most stable environments on Earth. When that environment starts changing, you have nowhere to go, no backup plan, no escape route. You're locked into this deep sea existence, and now the rules of the game are being rewritten faster than you can possibly adapt. The changes aren't coming from your world. They're coming from above, from creatures you've never seen, living in a realm you could never survive. And these changes aren't gradual like the geological shifts your species has weathered for millions of years. They're happening in decades, sometimes years, sometimes even faster than that. Your food supply, that constant, gentle rain of organic matter from the surface, is changing. The chemistry is different now. Microscopic pieces of plastic drifted down with the marine snow, and your body can't tell the difference. You consume them because you have to consume everything that falls. These particles accumulate in your tissues, in your reproductive organs, disrupting processes that have worked flawlessly for millennia. The water around you is becoming more acidic. The ocean is absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere above, and this changes the fundamental chemistry of your world. The pH levels that have remained stable for your entire evolutionary history are shifting. Your body struggles to maintain the delicate chemical balance that keeps you alive. Your ability to process nutrients becomes compromised. Your reproductive success plummets. Temperature changes that seem small to surface dwellers are catastrophic in your world. A degree or two of warming penetrates into the deep, disrupting the thermal layers that have defined your habitat for millions of years. The currents that bring you food and oxygen begin to shift. Areas that have been rich, feeding grounds for countless generations, become barren wastelands. The pressure changes too. Not the crushing pressure you're built for, but the dissolved gas concentrations that pressure controls. Oxygen levels drop as warmer waters hold less dissolved gas. Dead zones expand, creeping into territories that have teemed with life since before the continents took their current shapes. You find yourself in an environment where even your ultra-efficient metabolism can't extract enough oxygen to survive. Then there's the noise. The deep ocean was once a place of near silence, broken only by the distant calls of whales and the subtle sounds of geological activity. Now it's filled with the constant drone of ship engines, the explosive sounds of seismic surveys searching for oil deposits, the industrial noise of deep-sea mining operations. The acoustic environment you've known for millions of years is being shattered. But perhaps the most devastating change is the direct destruction of your habitat. Massive trawling nets scrape across the seafloor, destroying in minutes what took centuries to build. The slow-growing coral gardens and sponge forests that provide structure and shelter in your world are being obliterated. The sediment communities that form the base of your food web are being churned up and scattered. Deep-sea mining operations are beginning to target the mineral-rich nodules and crusts that have formed over millions of years on the ocean floor. These aren't just rocks, they're the foundation of entire ecosystems. Communities of creatures that exist nowhere else on Earth are being wiped out before they're even discovered and cataloged. The mining process creates sediment plumes that spread for hundreds of kilometers, burying feeding grounds and clogging the delicate filtering systems that many deep-sea creatures depend on. The lights from mining equipment disrupt the natural patterns of bioluminescence that deep-sea creatures use for communication and hunting. The electromagnetic fields from the machinery interfere with the sensory systems that have evolved over millions of years. Your reproductive cycles, already stretched across years due to the energy constraints of deep-sea life, are being disrupted by these environmental changes. The precise chemical cues that trigger spawning are being masked by pollution. The temperature and pressure conditions that your eggs require for development are becoming increasingly rare. The larvae that do successfully hatch find themselves in a world that no longer provides the conditions they need to survive. The interconnected nature of the deep-sea ecosystem means that disruptions cascade through the food web in ways that are impossible to predict or control. Species that have coexisted for millions of years are suddenly finding themselves in competition for resources that are becoming scarce. Predator-prey relationships that have been stable for geological ages are being disrupted as the abundance and distribution of species shift. You're part of an ecosystem that operates on timescales that humans can barely comprehend. The deep sea is a place where individual organisms can live for centuries, where communities develop over millennia, where evolutionary processes unfold over millions of years. But the changes happening now are occurring faster than any deep-sea ecosystem has ever had to adapt to. The cruel irony is that as these changes accelerate, scientists are only just beginning to understand the incredible biodiversity and ecological importance of the deep ocean. New species are being discovered faster than they can be described, and many are going extinct before they're even known to science. The deep sea, which covers more than half of the planet's surface, remains less explored than the surface of Mars. Your world is disappearing, and most of the creatures responsible for its destruction don't even know you exist. They've never seen the delicate beauty of the deep-sea communities, never witnessed the slow dance of life in the abyss, never understood the incredible adaptations that allow life to flourish in what they consider a barren wasteland. The changes are irreversible on any timescale that matters to your species. Even if all human impact on the deep ocean stopped today, it would take centuries for the chemistry to return to normal, millennia for the physical habitats to recover, and millions of years for the lost biodiversity to be replaced through evolutionary processes. This is the reality of your existence as a blobfish in the modern world. You're a survivor from an ancient lineage, perfectly adapted to one of the most extreme environments on Earth, but completely defenseless against changes that are happening faster than your species can possibly respond to. You're witnessing the end of a world that has remained stable for millions of years, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. Your story is being repeated across the deep ocean, in trenches and seamounts, in hydrothermal vents and abyssal plains. Countless species that have survived ice ages and mass extinctions are now facing their final chapter. The deep sea, Earth's last great wilderness, is being transformed into something unrecognizable. And in this transformation, creatures like you, with your ancient wisdom and impossible adaptations, are becoming living fossils in a world that no longer has room for the kind of patience and specialization that made you possible in the first place.